In this particular vineyard, as in many of our vineyards, is we go with a permanent cover crop, and that means that we're not doing any cultivation. And what's even more, a little bit more difficult for that in this particular vineyard site is the fact that we're also organic, so we cannot do any weed sprays or anything like that under the vine rows. So we have to figure out a way to maintain and work with the weeds that we have. The one big advantage to permanent cover crops is the fact that these kind of grasses will have deep roots over time, and they open up the soils. They allow a lot of oxygen and nutrients to get deep into the soil profile. And what we find is that they're actually a benefit. There's a lot more earthworms per square foot. The grasses and the vines are not directly competing with each other, because as you can see here with this green strip, this is just still staying a little bit green because of some of the morning fog that we might have, or some of the dew in the morning. On this particular ranch this year, after 14 years, we actually went back in and cultivated out after harvest every other row to come back and replant basically a nice grass culture. Whereas next year we'll come and do the same thing in the alternate rows and get rid of a lot of the noxious weeds that come with that over time, whether it's through floodwaters or not. In the cultivated vineyards, one thing I failed to mention earlier is if we hold off from cultivating or getting on that ground when it's still very wet, we're not going to compact that soils. And that is also a very detrimental thing to any permanent crop, is having compacted soils. A lot of farmers like to get on the soil as soon as they can, and they're actually creating a plow pan. So even as we mow and chop up the vineyard brush and the cover crop late in the season, we'll let that sit for a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and start our cultivation on the relatively drier soil, so that way we're not compacting. I think one of the worst things you can do for a permanent crop, whether it be an orchard, olives, or even in this case vineyards, as we are sitting in a vineyard, is getting on those heavy wet soils and compacting it, restricting the flow of oxygen, nutrients, water into that root zone. These vines here are planted in 1996, and we know we have active roots 8 feet deep down here on this on these vines. We have neutron probes, and we know that we actually get water uptake at 8 feet. And so that just tells me that the grasses, the permanent grasses, are not hindering or impacting the growth of these vines at all from doing what they have to do. In every situation, there's always going to be weeds. Weeds is one of man's worst enemies, you might say. And there's always going to be direct competition with weeds with the crop that you're actually trying to maintain and grow. Sometimes it could be good, sometimes it could be bad. What I like to do is try to maintain a clean area under the vines. But because this vineyard is organically farmed, we don't have the availability of a lot of the commercial pre-emergence and or contact type of products, herbicides, that are suitable for this operation. So we do mechanical mowing, and or sometimes we'll have different types of mechanical equipment that comes through. It's very labor intensive. That actually removes the soil from under the vines and puts it down. What the problem is because we have our permanent cover, and then we're doing like the hoe plow operation, we're putting that dirt on here, we have no way to really put it back. So I have to utilize different types of equipment that's very expensive to operate, very expensive to maintain, and it's really not that much better for removing weeds from under the vines or under the trellis itself. And we still have to come in with shovels and try to dig out those weeds. So through different practices, we have found that mowers with winged mowing underneath also works, and just again keeping the grasses down. Once the weather changes and it stops raining, a lot of these grasses will dry up and be dormant for the rest of the summer.